morning, everybody. This is Mark Golden, and geez, what is today? Oh, that's right, it's August 25th. So what we have going on today is obviously the solar eclipse that occurred earlier this week, so Monday. So you're probably wondering why we have two shows in 1 week. The other one was part of the solar eclipse special. I had a live cam going on, which you see behind me here, as well as a used camera set up in my backyard. Sadly, up in Portland, we didn't have much of a solar eclipse. In fact, I have the video from my camera behind me. So I'm going to do that and fast forward a little bit. So you can see there, there's a little bit of shadow. The intensity of the sun is diminishing. Other than it's shrinking the actual size of the sun. We did not have. These are equirectangulars. I thought I'd go ahead and show them in flattened mode instead of showing them in their 360. But all of these, including this one, this was actually in Salem as well. Fast forward these, they're in about 12 times speed so that you can run through these pretty quickly. Salem, which was actually within the corridor, was pretty dramatic, as you'll see in a moment. And all of these will be available if you want to don a headset, or you can go out to YouTube yourself. But I have a playlist of all the ones throughout the country. Here's another one from Oregon. Now, these 360 cameras range from obviously the one that I use, which is the Insta360 Nano for the iOS devices, to I guess one of them was a Samsung Gear 360, as well as when it comes to me. But there's several that were used. As you can see, the quality changes, but obviously they all did a good job of dramatically showing the reduction in light. This actually was done by Time magazine. As you can see there, actually Time Life magazine. It's more dramatic and quality is very good. If you download all these, you can actually, depending on your bandwidth, you have extreme bandwidth, you should be able to see some fairly good performance. In this case, this was an 8K. I think it was an 8K, so the resolution was pretty dramatic. And as you can see there, they had an image set up there to show the corona from a telescope, and it blooms out. And here's another one from Nashville, Tennessee. Now keep in mind, all of these are running at 12 times normal speed, so we can get through them fairly quick. Normal speed if you play them through YouTube. I thought to get through them very quickly, also it seemed to have a more dramatic effect on them. Here's another one in the same location. I think this might also be in Tennessee. Make a note of it. This is at an airport. this should be the last one. This is actually, I'll have to go back into my show notes, but this is also part of that playlist. This is from an island. It's also fairly nice by VR Pano. And this one is from, if I remember correctly, South Carolina, which would be the end of the path on the United States as a country or the North American continent. So there you go. Oh, well, so let's kind of move on into our theme, which is, as I call it, VAXR or virtual augmented mixed reality in education. And I've got a few links up that I will bring up here in a second. And so let's go to this screen. And like I said, there are several, and they'll all be in the show notes, but essentially throughout the world, there obviously is a lot of potential in this. We've covered on several times on the show how Google has embraced this with Cardboard. They actually had not only the Cardboard apps, but a specific one for schools, which if you remember, we discussed about a month ago, that is available to the public. So it's not only for school systems, but many of them think there's some huge prospect in that. We've also covered on several occasions VR in training. And if you just caught this through our Twitter, you'll notice that even Kentucky Fried Chicken, and I have a few videos to show what they plan to do with it, is gotten in the game. Some people think it's a prank or marketing. Others actually say, no, it's going to be serious. They're actually going to be using that for training. We'll see. I think last week we also covered how UPS will be using it to train new drivers, which I think seems like a no-brainer. Having a VR immersive experience where you're driving instead of being out on the streets, I think is practical. I could see this in driving education, and a lot of times these simulators are fairly expensive, but you throw in I don't know, Xbox wheel or whatever the case may be, and a VR headset, and basically you've got your entire simulator, and then you just need to develop software for it. And that'll be one of the things we'll be talking about later in my subject. Is I think the new mixed reality headsets from Microsoft is going to be a game changer. One, because of the cost, and two, I found them to be fairly reliable, and the actual process of developing using the Unity 3D engine or Unreal is fairly straightforward. And I'm actually going to go through a project at the end of the podcast if you're interested in learning on your own. So stay tuned. Probably about 30 minutes from now, we'll get into that. So back into the news. Here's another link that I found. Trends to watch for in VR. So more affordable headsets. As you know, the HoloLens, which is actually mixed reality, is not really affordable, but there's thoughts that they will come down in price in the next version. And I had some thoughts on that, since I've been using the mixed reality headset, which is only the HP version was only $320. What I found is pretty sure that the camera systems are very similar. So the tracking system is similar. Now, what if you replaced the panel and left the tracking system? You could use this for all kinds of things. Obviously, you could use a projector system. So I'm thinking that OEMs are going to be looking at creating a low-cost version of the HoloLens. There's been rumors of that by Lenovo. So we'll see where that's going. But I do think that we're probably going to see a HoloLens type clone, probably around $800 to $1,000. But the thing to remember, and hopefully they'll keep this in mind, is the HoloLens. One of the things that keeps it or pushes the price up is that they contain the whole thing, which means its power supply, its battery, its processor are all built into the headset. Now, obviously, that makes it very portable, but it also minimizes the extent of the processing power available. So you literally have, in fact, I think less than mobile, some of the newer Snapdragon processor capability. But if you've been following Windows, they've been working very diligently in bringing Windows 10 to the ARM processor, namely the Snapdragon. So I would not be surprised to see a Snapdragon version of this in the near future at a reasonable price. That may be why you see that Google is announcing their own standalone headset. Again, only VR, but I think mixed reality headsets are going to be lower cost. But in saying that, I found that the VR headset really works out well. I've been playing with it for the last 2 weeks. As you know, if you've seen some of my videos on Twitter and or you followed it on Monday, I've actually used a Intel NUC, one of their Kaby Lake or Kaby Lake processor versions of it with the Iris, what is it, 620 plus. And I found that the performance was really good. And obviously, if you wanted to, you could go with the Kaby Lake i7. I don't know if they make that in the slimline version, but even if it's thicker, it's still something that you can wear on a belt. And so I created a belt system, about 3 hours of power using an Anton Bauer battery, but you could go with a Sony V-Lock, which you can get for about $100 and get about 3 hours and be able to navigate because of the way the inside out tracking works wherever you want. And because the NUC with memory and hard drive you can get for about 500 with the headset really kind of brings it in the realm of a mobile phone, in my opinion, with a little bit more performance than a mobile phone. And then clearly, you could take that headset and use it elsewhere. And I have, and basically moved it very quickly from one system to another. So I think it's a very versatile platform. So the other thing, let's hit the next on that they think of, is not only will you have lower cost headsets, as we talked about, um, the hand controllers, which are very important. Now, I don't have a set of the mixed reality hand controllers, but I do have them for HTC Vive as well as the Oculus. And I think they're extremely important because they add that ability that no longer makes you a disembodied entity that allows you to interact with the world. And the fact is that they will be coming out. In fact, I think they got some who is it? Acer has FCC approval on their handsets, which look very similar to the developer version. I think or the reference design. We're going to be seeing that very soon. And then obviously, easy to use content creation platforms. I don't know what your opinion is. I've been using Unity for several years now. There is a learning curve, especially if you're going to be creating your own scripts. So you'd have to learn C sharp, but there are other tools that you can use with it. There's a ton of scripts that are already pre-programmed. You just basically drop them in. Same thing with assets. So there's not a lot of work unless you want to do a lot of work in order to get something up. And we're actually going to be using Unity 3D with the mixed reality system later on in the show. Okay, so what else do we have? 360 cameras. Well, obviously, as we showed earlier today, it's extremely immersive. In fact, as I mentioned, if you see some of my tweets earlier this week, literally I could look up into the sun through my, what did I have? My own Dream Shredder Daydream compatible headset and feel like I was actually at the presence of this solar eclipse in my front yard without actually looking at it. So obviously there's some safety issues there. Now, obviously the quality isn't going to be the same as the natural world, but the fact is that you can immerse yourself and identify yourself in a particular area. Obviously, content's being created to create some more immersion from that perspective. I just saw, and we'll see in a moment, that there's an actual curriculum set up, and part of it is to create 360 production, how to do it. The other thing is social VR spaces. Alt Space VR, as you know, had kind of dropped out, and then I guess there's been some resurgence. Somebody bought them out, or they got some extra funding. But the one that I'm very interested in, we've covered it several times, or I've covered it several times earlier on the show, is Sansar. And if you're not familiar with it, download it. Don't download it if you have the latest developer build or the what they call the Fast Ring Insider Edition of Windows 10. Sadly, it does not work. I talked to them directly. They said that at this point, they're not really concerned about it, which I think is scratching my head a little bit. The Fall Creators Edition will be out probably within the month. I would think that they would have a version out, but they indicated that they're not concentrating on that, just fixing bugs with the current version. With that being said, if you have just the creators version on your machine now, it does work properly, and I've had some very interesting experiences with it. And what I find to be very important with that is the fact is, just like remember Second Life, that you can have multiple people in the same environment without having to add network functionality, which has its own hassles. But having all that already built into it, and with the accounts being free, I think there might be some interest in that area. So, you know, obviously, this was an article done by Campus Technology. I have to agree that I think there is a lot of interest in there. Let's move on to the next one here. This is Class VR. This is a full curriculum, how to use VR in your classroom. Um, they have standalone headsets, educational interface, classroom experience. So I didn't go through all of it, but if you're interested in doing it yourself in a classroom situation, you might want to reach out to them. And then obviously you can get a free download guide. Now, what I'm not sure is this, yeah, it appears that they sell their own headset, simple classroom control system. So this not only provides some guides on how to apply it, but it appears that you can actually um, go through and sign up for their resources and services as well. Here's another one, Global VR Education Sector. So this is a class that you can take. Um, let's see, actually, I'm sorry, this is a sector book. So did I jump ahead already? Here we go. So here's the one I was talking about. For $99 to $125, you can sign up if you're in the New York area for a class on how to use VR or AR in education. Sadly, I won't be there, but I think the price is reasonable. And using education, crafting immersive experience for humanities and society, which I think could be very important, especially as we've talked about before, putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, I think is very important. Okay, so let's jump back to this. So this is a guide if you want to know about the, I guess, the financial perspectives of the education sector market. And I think that would be something very interesting to look at. So go ahead. And, well, actually, it's kind of expensive to get $3,500 for one user license. So you may have to find this guide somewhere else. Okay, and then finally, why was this my theme of this particular week? Well, one of the reasons was we have school coming up, but the other was this announcement from Microsoft that I thought was very interesting. Let's see if this is it. Here we go. This was this viewed mixed reality comes to Windows 10. Now, obviously, if you're not part of the what they call the fast ring skip ahead build, you're not going to see this. And I don't know if anybody, I tried to get on it and they've closed it down, so I didn't get a chance. But what they've added is in this application called, and it's already on your machine now, it just does not have, it's called View 3D and allows you to view 3D models from a assortment of 3D model formats, as well as you can bring from the remix3d.com website. Let's see, I guess I can bring that up. This is Microsoft's website that essentially has a ton of models. And obviously, this is growing more and more, but you can download these and import these into their 3D Paint program, which we've covered before, but also into this viewer. And what I'm hoping, and it doesn't appear to be the case right now, or at least I have not been able to use it, they'll be able to import these like holograms into the Cliff House that's the opening portal for the mixed reality system. But let's jump back to this. What caught my eye, though, is that if you had the ability, you could get a version of this that does something very similar to some of the demos I've created with ARKit from Apple. And essentially, if you've got a rear-facing camera on a tablet or something like that, you would be able to essentially put your character in the scene. It appears there's a shadow there, and more importantly, be able to track it, very similar to ARKit. And I could see this also being used in the headsets as well as the HoloLens itself. But basically with I guess they were talking about Microsoft Surfaces, you'd be able to put this in the Microsoft Surface and be able to walk around an object or a character just like you can with ARKit that's coming out. So I think there's huge opportunities there. The sad thing is they've only made this available in the next version of Windows 10 Creator, which is codenamed Redstone, and who knows when that will be out. It's supposedly also available in Windows 10S, which some people have identified the S as being for schools. And with that being the case, unless you actually install it, which I don't really recommend, I guess there'll be some systems out there that will have this capability. But I think there's huge potential there. The fact is that a lot of the tablets, as well as what do you want to call it, dual notebooks / tablets, like the Microsoft Surface, as well as other clones of that, having this ability to be able to put objects in the real world has a lot of potential, especially in educational market. And the tablets are obviously less expensive. So there's some competition out there. Things are starting to heat up around, obviously, the educational market as well as the coming up Christmas. Okay, so that's enough about our theme and talking about this Microsoft blog that just came out. The thing I'm going to jump to a video now. Unreal, and this actually came out last week or maybe even 2 weeks ago. Unreal Engine, what was it? Where are we at? 4.17.1 now, but there's a slew of new features with it. Supposedly the mixed reality features in there. There hasn't been a lot of talk about it, but I just found some resources last night. It's called the Mixed Reality Framework, and somebody's already started playing with it. Some good notes, so I may be working on that next week to have an example. And what that will allow a person to do is to actually record themselves in front of a green screen, which then immerse themselves in their VR environment. So you can be wearing the headset and actually look like you're working or inside that. And we've shown several examples of that. Okay, so let's go on with the actual video. Now, this was done for Chevrolet, and I thought it was pretty
Lewis, you've won so many times in your career. Monaco in '09, for example. How do you do it, man?
Well, you know what? There's always a way to win. There's always a way through.
Lewis is going to be the first human ever to race a car operated by artificial intelligence. Let's meet the competition. Aja.
Hello, gentlemen. In my simulations, I have beaten Lewis 148,623 times.
And how many real races have you won, Aja?
This will be the first. I see all the possibilities, Lewis. You cannot pass me. You do not win.
There's always a way through.
Lewis, congratulations. This was a historic win.
Thanks, everyone.
So,
as Kim said,
what
my name
was
is
very
Angus
interesting
Steele.
about that,
I'm with
let
a
me bring
company
down the
called
volume of this. We'll just have it play in the background. Is that this was done using the Unreal 4.17 engine with this new compositing feature, which allowed you to bring in essentially 3D assets in real time using tracking and compositing and to create that video. So essentially we have a new way of rendering very realistic scenes within the environment. And you probably figured out already, both of those vehicles were both rendered using the Unreal Engine. So this individual, and I'll have these links in the show notes, it's, as you can see there, well, you can't see it. It's about 50 minutes, so I'm not going to go through it. But essentially, they break down the whole process. They show how they use these cards, and now I've already forgotten the name of it, but they use these cards to create a tracking system, but it will also evaluate lighting, and then they talk about the lighting system as well, and how they go about getting accurate lighting. Obviously, this calibration chart is very important. Then how they created both a mirrored ball to create a mirrored reflections, as well as I can't think of the name now. There's for grayscale and shadowing, which is the ball on the left. Geez, I've already forgotten what it is. But essentially, you can take all that information and provide accurate assessment of the external world and apply that to the models. Now, this has been available in previous rendering type of devices, but it hasn't been real time. Now that we have the same capability in Unreal, offers a lot of potential and, more importantly, real-time feedback that you can utilize almost immediately. And here they show the ambient occlusion decals, which is a new feature as well. Then they talk about how they created the high-speed wheel spin, that it accurately looks like what you take in a camera. And then here they're actually showing it in the Unreal Engine. This is an equirectangular, and then obviously some of the scenes, and then how they use masking in order to reduce, as you can see there, how it shows through. They can mask it so it looks more realistic, and some of the other effects that were created. But the fact is that this was all done in the Unreal Engine and then composited and then sent out. I think has huge potential, and hopefully to explore that more in the future. But as I said, the other thing is this mixed reality framework. Also, the AR kit for Unreal is in there as well. So if you wanted to start exploring these features in Unreal, it's now available. The other thing that I noticed that it's not in this build, which is 417, but you can get a special GitHub build of, I think it's actually 416.2 now, or even 416.1, that works with the UWP, which is Universal Windows Platform system that allows you to do mixed reality. I've been playing with it. I haven't been successful so far. But there is a build out there, and that will be coming, I believe, in a later 417 or more than likely a 418, just in time for these headsets that are coming out. So hopefully I can have something out. So, I'm obviously playing this in the background. Take a look at it. If you haven't already moved to Unreal, Unreal has some advantages. There's some quirky things with it, but I've used it for several years now, and I kind of like it as long as you stay within their confines. But some of the results can be really fantastic and can be done fairly quickly. Okay, let's jump back to our next item. And I thought this was kind of cool. The Marines, actually, it was an individual who was actually a Marine, has created a new glider drone that is several times less expensive than the the glider drones that they're using previously. And a lot of the reasons for that is that they were 3D fabricated. And here is the actual model of it. And here we have it again. I'll zoom in on the image there. So essentially the body as well as the wings are all 3D fabricated. And then obviously the components are put into it. And what did they say about geez, let's see. I don't want to misquote them. What did they say this will cost? Yeah, $613 for off-the-shelf electronics. So I'd say about $1,000 versus anywhere between 50 or 35,000 to 50,000 for what they're using now. So this would make them almost disposable, easier to use. Right now, they have specialists that actually fly these things. So right now, it's at MITRE Corporation being tested, which is what MITRE Corporation does. They test systems, and we'll see how much that adds to the cost. But I thought this was very interesting, and this is an article from Autodesk, and so you can go back and read it. But actually, a Marine who had a mechanical engineering degree is the one that designed it. So I thought that was pretty cool. And basically, I think he's, what, 26 years old? So pretty cool, what some of our young people are doing today. Okay, let's move on to the next item. Last week, I kind of talked about this new technique for 3D printing, but I didn't really get a good explanation of its process. This article from The Next Big Future actually does a better job of detailing that process. And literally, you have a nozzle that drops cells out piece by piece, and they are, if you can read it here, they're in a lipid containing oil, and they're dropped, which kind of keeps them in place, and they actually move the container underneath it to position them. And it's a really nice article. It talks more and more about this. But what I found that's very important from some of the things that I've learned in the past, before you printed a framework, a lattice, and then you grew the cells like a sugar lattice, and then you grew the cells inside this lattice, and then you dissolve the sugar. Here, you can literally lay down an organic cell one by one in order to create this. And I thought that was extremely interesting, because now it allows us to refine and actually work at a cellular level. And here they have the cells that I think they're using a luminous or fluorescent material with it, so that they can actually see them in use. So lots of exciting information coming out in this field. And we probably will see more within the coming months. All right, another thing that's coming out I thought was really nice from our scanner section is there is I don't know if it's a company or an individual, the fish guy has been able to acquire a grant that will allow him to scan 20,000 animals. Now, I'm thinking probably fish and amphibians, as they show here, but it will allow him to scan these, and then with a CT scanner, and then make these models available for free. So the potential there, let's see if I can't expand that. Let me do it this way. But the potential of that, imagine being able to show these, we're talking about augmented reality and virtual and mixed reality, be able to have these in a classroom situation. So where you may have only been able, like in my days, we had a frog to dissect. Now we would have the ability to look at a multiple of animals through their, obviously with a CT, you can look at their muscular structure, their skeletal structure, the nervous system, without actually having to dissect, or in conjunction with dissecting, all these different areas that before were just illustrations in a book. But with a 3D model, you could have that, let's say with augmented reality, on a table, in a VR, you put your headset on, you're in a virtual laboratory with these objects, and you could probably interact and dissect these models just like the real thing. So if you didn't have a budget for actually getting true dissecting, or maybe you didn't want to go in that direction, you could dissect virtually. So I see a lot of potential here. So $2.5 million National Foundation funding, and his goal is to start on 1st of September, and then over the next 4 years, be able to scan in over 20,000 vertebrate specimens, representing 80%. So not only will it be what we're seeing here, but all kinds of vertebrates. So I'm pretty excited about that too. So hopefully, instead of just waiting 4 years from now, they'll leak these out slowly so that we'll have them available to us to play with. So Johnny can now virtually dissect with his virtual pocket knife. Oh, well, so let's move on to, again, an opportunity for training. Road to VR put out this great little article, and I have a few little videos, so I'm going to show this one. This is the hard way to virtual training. Well, as many people who have reported on this, it's kind of a obviously a wacky way of doing VR training. Some people think it's a joke. KFC says, no, we're actually going to do this. I'm interested how they're going to move forward with it. It kind of reminds me of BioShock. So kind of a very scary way of looking at that. Okay, so I actually have a couple more videos. Let me drop out of this so that I'll show right here. They also have some 360 videos.
Robot servant is going to show you how to bread the chicken.
You can immerse
But
yourself
robots
in what you'd
can
be
never
able to
make
work with.
the chicken.
But yeah, if this is actually a demo and you have to actually bread the chicken,
Pieces of dumb metal
I'll
without
go through it
soul
in the article.
or
But,
mouth.
I think this is
demand
a
human
kind of
touch in
a
my
unique
kitchen.
way,
Watch
obviously,
this idiotic
assuming
robot
that
show
many
you
of
the proper technique.
cooks or the people, employees of KFC. Let's see, I've got another one.
Now, you may leave this delicious prison and
So many of the employees are younger, they're probably familiar with
my friend,
gamify one of the tasks.
into a
Intriguing way.
higher consciousness.
So kind of neat. Obviously, more and more applications we're applying this training, job training.
Enter the light. Do not be afraid, my friend.
Standard academics as well. Okay, so let's move on to the main course of, or maybe not the main, but as I mentioned in the tweet, we're going to be going through the steps of creating your own mixed reality app. And to do so, let me jump to my screen, which is up right now. We need to make sure that we're prepared to do so. And first thing you need to do is make sure that you download the latest beta version of Unity, which is now 2017.2.0b8, and download that. Now, make sure when you are installing it that you select the two Windows.NET features down at the bottom of the list and anything else that you want to build applications for. And if you've already loaded it previously, make sure you go back and select those two. And then download the latest Windows Creator SDK. I've noticed that they come out with a new one each time that there is a new build that goes out in the fast ring. So make sure you have the SDK of the build that you're working with. I'll have to go back and see, but I think that may have been a reason that I was getting a black screen on the app when you launch it in the simulator, but I'll have to go back and check that. So make sure you have that. And then once it's all downloaded, the cool thing about this beta version, it also loads Visual Studio 2017, so that you don't need to do that, but you do need to go back in and make sure there are certain things set up for it. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. So it's called the Visual Studio Installer. There's just two icons. One is the Visual Studio 2017, and then the other one is the installer. And it should be coming up. There it is. And there are certain items that need to be installed. So we'll click Modify. And if you already have Visual Studio, you may have to update it. So go ahead and do the update process. Again, that broke my system. So I had to make sure I had the most recent NDK. Once I got it, or not NDK, SDK for Windows Creator. And once all that was installed, then everything started working again. So make sure everything is consistent and up to date. So the thing that you need to check that's not checked when they bring it in Visual Studio is this Universal Windows Platform Development. That's the important thing, because that's what allows you to create apps for the Windows Store, and also to allow you to create mixed reality or HoloLens apps. Then the other thing that should already be checked is the game development with Unity. So if not, make sure that's checked. And then go over to individual components. And again, this is already checked, but make sure that it's checked. And that's the NuGet Package Manager. When I first installed this, that wasn't the case and had a couple of errors with that. So those are the things that you need to make sure are connected. And then if they are, just close it all out, because you don't need it anymore. So now we can actually launch Unity. And if this is the first time using Unity, you need to make an account. And depending if you're professional or personal, make sure you sign up. Personal means you can get a free account if you're using it for educational or personal use. If you're a business making less than 100,000, you can still also use it. And just, again, make sure that you have an account, because it'll be very important. And then I'll go ahead and bring up the Van Gogh. So if you watch the tweet that I had out or the video, the Van Gogh MSXR is the same Van Gogh inside painting that I've used several times on multiple platforms. I thought that would be great to use that. Obviously, this is my own error. It doesn't affect what I'm doing. And then that just comes up. So essentially, if you're familiar with Unity, you can move around. And the cool thing is this was done by Ruslan, who is a Russian immigrant to France. He's an excellent 3D modeler. He's the one that created this. He baked in all the shadowing and textures. So kudos to him. Again, thank you, Ruslan. Shout out. If you need any modeling work, or, I mean, he's pretty busy with his own stuff. He's kind of popular now. SketchUp, sorry, it's not SketchUp, Sketchfab, which is the other 3D object asset website that allows you to upload and view models. They have shown this in their own, I would say VR, actually VR, but it's what I call stationary VR. So I've converted this not only to the occipital version so I could walk around. Obviously, I've also put it on the HTC Vive and Oculus, but I wanted to see how it would work on a lower end mixed reality system. And I was pleasantly surprised. If you saw the video, which is up on YouTube, I was very pleased. It was very smooth. I was able to walk around. And this was on a lower grade Intel NUC for about $500. Also, if you don't need something that small, you could create a small system with an i3, 8 gigs of memory, a small 128 SSD, and either an NVIDIA 1050, what is it, an R60 AMD card, whatever is VR called. In fact, the 1050 isn't VR, but I found that the overclock version just meets the minimum. For this mixed reality, it works superb. And so I used it on that system. As I said, you can take, as long as you have Windows on your system, you have, and now with the Windows Creator, the build for the mixed reality portal is already there. So if you've got a headset, you just plug it in and you can put it on any system you want. It's very, very easy to set up. And we'll actually go through some of that steps here in a moment. All right, so I've already got everything set up. There's nothing really special, unlike if you've done anything with Google Cardboard, Daydream, or iOS, you have to bring in plugins. And with this, you don't have to do anything. Just like when you're working with the HTC Vive or Oculus, as long as you set up VR, select VR, and choose the right selection, all you need to do is make sure you have a camera. And so I made a couple of changes, though. I changed my clipping plane so that it's smaller. And what else did I do? I just left occlusion culling on, allows HDR, and I think that did make a little bit of difference. And then all the other systems are default. I did change the background color to black because I put a little surprise in here. If you notice, there's a door. Now I turned off what I have in the doorway just to keep it as a surprise. But with the background being black, it looks somewhat ominous. Obviously, the window here is a plane with an image on it, courtesy of Ruslan. I've added some chirping sounds to it. That's a 3D audio. So when you turn your head, it's positional coming out of the window. So you can actually, it gets louder as you go towards the window. So kind of a neat effect. But I found that because the quality is just like a desktop, it probably gave me the best immersion quality of any of the systems I work with, even though sadly the FOV is less than on an HTC Vive or a Oculus. It is as good as any other cardboard or mobile systems. So keep that in mind if you're choosing on what system to buy. And so with all that, bring in your stuff. Then the important thing is to make sure you have things set up when you are ready to build it. So you go to your build settings, and actually I think I can have this open. So you want to select obviously the scene that you've built. So make sure you save it. Make sure that's selected. Then you go to Universal Windows Platform. And then here's the important things over here. You want to make sure your target device is a HoloLens. Build type is D3D. And then your latest installed SDK, which should be automatically detect your latest SDK. And the SDK is whatever you install. Remember, we talked about that a little earlier. And that's about it for there. Then you go to player settings. And you put in your and then your default icon. And again, keep in mind that these all have certain resolutions. It's not such an issue or much of an issue here, but it is one when you actually need to create that. Doing it within easier because it will automatically create them if you give it a large enough. Okay, sorry about that. I had a crash there. So if you're still with me, yeah, that's the prior to actually launching the show, so it makes it easy to recover. Normally I don't have that issue, but it happens once in a while. Okay, so back to this. So what do we have? And this is where all these on the titles and logos. I suggest not doing it there. If you want to, you got to make sure that your formats match the actual size. So that could be a little cumbersome. And then they also have to be imported within the Unity system, which could be a little bit more work, but then it's all contained in the Unity environment. Same thing with the splash image. So a lot of these, and I did put one in here, and for whatever reason it doesn't show up because it's not the Pro or the Plus version of Unity, the personal, which only shows the icon or the Unity 3D icon. Okay, so other settings. This is another important area. Basically, keep the defaults. You don't really have to change anything other than right here, app compatibility. Just select app 2.0 and .NET 2.0. The other option is subset. I don't know if it'll work. I actually the same. You could do fairly easy here. You click on the button, you create a password for it, and then you create it. And actually, this is the one. Thing I didn't have installed here because I don't want to mess with it just for the show. But you want to make sure that certain options are set up. If you're going to be using a webcam, you want to make sure that you have these features. You watch it as well. And if you forget to do it here, you can always do that in Visual Studio as well. And then finally, the most important area is the XR settings. There is only, actually, I think there might be two. So I guess the Vuforia features in window. That's it. Then you're ready to go. So I'm not going to build it because I have already. Once it's built, what you do is just click build. Actually, I'll do it. It'll tell you where do you want to put it. And you just create yourself what I do is I create a build and then increment it. For instance, I was on build 7, so next one would be build 8. And a no-brainer, just create a new directory and then a big scene. If you're using a larger scene, that could be an issue. So once it builds, and this is what I found in iOS as well. It's not the case when you create Cardboard or Daydream because it builds the scripts in order. Developing apps for now. It's been a while since I've created it because you don't really need it with Unity, but with the mixed reality, it's Visual Studio. Okay, so once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and close this. Things that if you have everything set up correctly and you select the VR feature, is that you can actually and kind of look for the mixed reality portal, but you also need to make sure that you have set your here. This is for developers. That won't show up and it will request to hook up your headset. Well, obviously, if you don't have a headset, it makes it useless. So as you see here, I have my Windows. So actually, I'll bring it up. So not only can I move around, as you can see there. I wish they had a delayed teleport. It's kind of cumbersome. You can left and right increment. Actually, the On the gamepad, you can kind of strafe left and right and move backwards. But if you move forward, it always teleports. And so sometimes you just want a fine increment, and that's not really available. And I haven't figured out if there is an option to do that with the gamepad. Since I do not have the controllers, I wish I did, I can't give you an assessment of how they work other than the simulator, which is kind of touchy and a little cumbersome. Okay, so I have this up. Now, how did I get here? Well, one of the things that you can do within the portal is actually bring up your settings. And depending on your hardware, these settings there we go. As you double click on that, um, obviously you can enable, so if you've got a headset, you can use headset audio and the headset mic. Now I found that you can enable this, but because the way this works, you have to back on for the head. Build, but the previous builds I had to actually enable the audio by manually going into my audio control panel and enable it. That's not the items to it. They're now available for you to use. What else? Or you can reset your home. So if you added new pan, the new visual quality features in the latest build. So just leave it on auto. Down with the Nook, if you turn it to high, even though it makes the textures on some of the models better quality, I noticed that there is no anti. I found that low also kind of creates a kind of a ring of lower resolution around a higher resolution, so you're more focused. But it's a ton. LED. Now I was wondering, well, how can they get away with digital IPD? A bit more slop. You center those, or obviously your IPD. Since you can't manually center them, they have some slop in there, but you can also adjust what's shown in each of the eyes through the digital screens, and then you can just move those digital screens inside or outside by pushing them in and out. Digital difference in it, so so that's about it. The home selection to make in your mixed reality portal that if you want to simulate, you have to be in developer mode. Make sure you do so. The other thing that I would recommend, especially if you're a developer, is turn on device or while you're running it, shows you your frame rate. So it's a pretty cool feature. So I would strongly recommend that. Okay. So back to this. Sorry about that. I noticed I was getting a little extra traffic. I left it on that KFC link and there was stuff coming in, and that always interferes with my bandwidth. So I wanted to remove it. All right. So back to this for developers. Make sure all this is turned on. and it does take a little bit of time. And then once this is done, you can close it. Then you can go back to your mixed reality portal. You'll get an option to load developers. That takes a little bit of time. Obviously, I'm saving you the burden of going through that here. But go ahead and make sure everything is set up for developers so that you can virtualize it. If you're not virtualizing it, don't worry about it. But if you're developing, I would highly recommend setting it up for that anyways. And then some features, you can actually now run the setup in the virtual, so you can, which doesn't make a lot of sense because if you're using the virtual version, obviously you can't set up an environment. And I'm just going to go back, but you can set up now if you've got a headset, kind of like the HTC Vive, your parameter to create a boundary, or you can set it up for seated or standing. Now, what I found was cool about this is if you set it up for seated or standing, that it has kind of a boundless boundary. So as long as you have good tracking, meaning you have enough novelty in your environment, you could basically walk around everywhere. And I did explore this in my own house, from walking from one room to the other and walking in one virtual area to another. So I thought that was a great feature with this Inside Out, is that you're no longer limited to a small area. What I did find out, though, in doing this outside, because there wasn't enough novelty or objects in the scene, it did lose tracking once you go out, let's say like a 20-foot boundary. But it still was pretty good. Doing it in my backyard, I noticed working with grass as well as the bushes and that. And I guess I can show a little video right now. Where's it at? Here. So I'll show it.
Each time I come up,
So
I
you
put
can
my
see me
hands on the
there
side.
in
When
the
I
video.
pop down in my squat
I'm
position,
running
chest
around,
up,
but
my
because
back's
of the
going to be
texture
flat.
in
I'm
the
going to
bushes,
pull
I
up.
think
I'm going
that's
to
what helps
extend
keep
through the
tracking.
hips, and then I'm going
And
to
that's
plate it
about
down
a
into a
20
squat
by
position.
40
So
foot
come down,
area, and I'm able to
feet
walk
balanced,
around
chest
there.
up, eyes up,
Holding it out.
pull,
The thing is, I actually have a
get
camera
underneath
there
it. Everybody
in
look
order
at my
to see
elbows
this.
pointing
It's a
straight up,
feature
knees
that
out.
I haven't
Get
been
up.
able to figure out.
When I get to the top, I'm
Obviously,
going to
this
dip.
build,
I'm going to
it
explode
fixed the
through.
image
I'm
capture
going to finish
feature,
all the way up
but I
vertically.
haven't figured
Dip,
out how to
explode.
use the video.
Come back up,
As you can
drop
see,
the
I
weight,
can track around
and back down.
the camera viewing this guy that's doing that. And so I thought that was pretty cool. So you have some really decent tracking capability with this device at a very low cost. So, you know, that's one of the things that sold me on this, is that I can do so much for so little. Like I said, for about $800, you can get yourself a nice little developer package, or even just a standard PC. And if you've already got a PC with a Kaby Lake, or even for instance, this little station I created that video, or this other video that I have. Let's see, I'll go ahead and show it now. This one here, it's a longer version. This one's out on YouTube. And you should have some audio with that, with the birds tweeting. This one was done in my standard development room, where I have an area set up, about a 10 by 8 area to walk around with the HTC Vive. I just used that same area, but again, I didn't have to create a parameter for it. And I'm able to walk around in this room that I created. Now, that little workstation I created was my little backpack system, which only has an i3, 8 gigs of memory, 128 SSD, as well as on top of it that GTX 1050 Ti. So altogether, it was about like $500 for that. So for $800, you can get a fairly decent VR system. Obviously, it's not going to compete with gaming, because there really isn't anything. But if you're wanting to develop what I think is going to be a large base of very inexpensive for education, or even industry, commercial industry, architecture, engineering, I think this is going to be a very good device for that. Now, keep in mind it supports 90 frames per second, so you have very similar quality. Now, even though it's LCDs, I didn't notice any ghosting or latency issues a lot of people concerned about. So, like I said, I'm very pleased with it. You know, you're getting what you paid for, but I think the quality is pretty decent. The FOV could be larger, but I think that has a lot to do with the sensor, not the sensors, the panels, which are about 2 inches. 2.9. So they're not even 3 inches, where the Oculus is 3.5, and then the HTC Vive is 3.6. So they're smaller, which I think is the reason why you have smaller lenses and less of an FOV. But you scale that up if you wanted to pay a little bit more, and you could have that. Again, it does compete very well in the mobile market and what you can get for headsets in there, like the Daydream or the Gear VR. I think the FOV is very similar. All right, so back to this. Depending on what you want to do, like I said, just set it up for seated, which is very easy. I'm not going to do it here because it's already set up. And let it come back up again. Now, I have noticed sometimes that the simulator seems to work pretty well, but hopefully we'll see. All right, here we go. Okay, so it's back up and running, and I can move around in it, but you may have already played with this. Let's see what we can do. So if I click on the Unity play button here, and then if I go back to the HoloLens, there it is. So I'm now within the not HoloLens, the mixed reality headset. And notice if you're looking at the screen behind, it's also moving as I move the headset. So if you actually have a headset, you can go back to your screen and use the positional tracking to actually look in the Unity. So I thought that was a cool feature that this already is set up, just like with an HTC Vive or Oculus, so that you can see the results almost immediately of what you're working with before even doing the build. So you can obviously take a look at things. One of the things I noticed is that the bed is floating a little bit. I didn't bother to push it down. I thought it was kind of a fun fact. But because you're in a VR environment and you can actually get closer to objects, especially with the inside out tracking, you can move around in it. You can inspect things a little bit better than I found working with just a 2D screen. Now, I don't like to actually work in the 3D, which you can do on Unreal and a certain build of Unity. I still like to work in the 2D for putting assets and moving them around, but be able to inspect them in the 3D or the VR environment is a very cool feature. So when you're done looking at it, you just go back and uncheck that. And I highly recommend doing that instead of shutting down the portal, because if you shut down the portal, this may or may not come back and you may lose it. So the other thing I would do before hitting the play button is make sure you save your scene and your project, especially if you have brought new assets in. So that way you don't lose any of the work that you're working on if this thing hangs. And I did have it hang. So learning from experience, make sure that you set yourself up properly. Okay, so with all that being done, as you know, earlier we did build it. So let's go out and find the build. So we don't necessarily have to close this. If you got enough memory, you shouldn't have to close anything. But if you're only running on 8 gigs, I would highly recommend, before bringing up Visual Studio, closing out Unity. All right, so we're going to click on the Visual Studio icon. And you know, actually, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make it a little easier for you. I'm going to go find my folder. Is it here? No. So let's see where I put this. Okay. So as I mentioned, I put this in build 7. So notice I have a Van Gogh MSXR SLN, spelled Van. I spelled it right there. SLN, which is the suffix that you need to create a Visual Studio solution. And then you actually, you can basically identify that this is what will open it, hit OK. It'll bring up Visual Studio as well as bring in your entire solution. And it'll take a few seconds. It's not that long. If it takes any longer than that, something went wrong, so keep that in mind. Okay, so I don't know why I have a weird window, but we don't need to really worry about this right now. The thing that you can do is look at these 3 items, select Release, X64, which is the only thing mixed reality works in, and then Local Machine. And then if you hit the play button here or click on Local Machine, you can create a build. And if I have everything set up properly, cross my fingers I do, I should be able to rebuild this. Now, I didn't rebuild it on this, so we'll see if it works. And the NuGet feature builds in, or the services that weren't installed. Okay, so it's still moving forward. And you can see that it's still running because, yep, got an error. So it's not going to work for me. And I'm not going to take some time here to show you, but essentially you can go through here and find out what the issue is. And this seems to be a similar issue that I had before. And it was making sure your SDKs all match up. So make sure, again, and I have not done that on this machine, you do that beforehand. But I do have a build that's already ready. So I'm going to go ahead and show that. And if I go over to this, go to my app packages, but I want to bring that up real quick. If it builds correctly, you'll have a build that's local only to your machine. And you'll see that by, because it didn't build correctly, I won't have it here. You'll have an app for it, an app icon, but it will not set you up so that you can basically run it locally, but you can't side load it on any other machine. And if you want to do that, you have to do a couple more steps. And the sad thing is that they didn't really explain this in the Unity build. I had to go out, and I'll have all these links in the show notes, to another site to figure out how to do that. Essentially, what you want to do is look for how to package a UWP, or Universal Windows Platform app, and you go to project, then you go down to store, and then notice it's ghosted because I didn't build it correctly, but you want to go out first and associate app with the store. And this is extremely important because if you don't do this, then you don't have a name for it. Now, you don't have to actually put it in the store, and you can do a search for it, or you can create your own, but this is also where you need to actually sign up for an account. So if you don't actually have a Universal Windows Platform account, you need to sign up, and that will be $19.95 for a personal, or $99.95 if you're setting it up for a business. So it's about the same as a Apple developer account that now allows you to actually export for side loading, or for sending up to the actual store. All right, so with that in mind, once all that is done, sorry, I shouldn't have closed it yet. One more feature. Once you set up your name, then you also have to create the app packages. And again, if everything built correctly, that should work for you. You will get the option to evaluate it for the store. At this particular point, if you're just side loading, I would ignore that. But if you do plan to set it up for the store, make sure that you do so. Mine failed because I am on a build that uses a Unity that has I guess a bad DLL in it. And I would have to have that replaced before I could actually bring it up for it to be approved in the Windows App Store. So I will probably do that next week, or as soon as they make this a final version. So as mentioned, I had already done this previously, so you'll have a new folder called App Packages. Double click on that, and I called mine Van Gogh MSI1 Test, and you can actually assign increments of whatever your package is, and then you can auto increment it if you want to. So this is what comes up. If you're wanting to install this or sideload it, you need to find the Power script, which is right here. And I'm sorry, PowerShell. Then you run the PowerShell script, click Run. First thing it does is it stores the certificate, and then you just hit yes, and then we want to actually add it. And there we go. We're processing it. Okay, so it was successfully installed. Press enter to continue, and it'll close out your PowerShell. Now, this can only work if you're either in developer mode, and we'll go back and I'll refresh your memories on this. Then you can go back and select under for developers. Make sure you're in developer mode. Developer mode. If you don't want to be a developer, you at least have to sideload apps. So that way you can bring this app in. If you don't have this selected and the default of Windows Store apps, you won't be able to install it, but it will give you an error identifying that. But like I said, if you're going to be developing, go ahead and set yourself in developer mode, which takes care of that. All right, now that I've done that, you notice my portals here. So I should be able to go into here, and I have something called XR in Sideband Go. I should be able to click on this. There you go. Voila. So we're now inside the simulator, but this simulator could also be your headset. And that's it. Pretty easy, huh? So like I said, I didn't want to spend or waste time troubleshooting the build, but my error before when this occurred is you have to make sure you have the proper SDKs. In fact, the problem could be that the SDK I have installed is the newest, which doesn't match the Unity build, and that could be where my issue is. I did notice when I upgraded Unity to the newer build in the previous version on another machine, I got the same error. Once I brought in the latest SDK, the errors went away and I was able to build properly. Here I have the latest SDK, but the older Unity. So I would also have to go in and locate the SDK for a previous build and bring that in as well. So matching up your SDKs and your Unity builds is kind of a pain, but right now, just make sure that you find out what build you have and what SDK works with it. And there are several SDKs out there, and you just need to make sure that you get the right ones. I will have the links in the show notes to where you can get the latest Unity as well as the latest SDK. And make sure they're matched up. If they don't, just load the previous SDK as well, and that should help you keep this working. Again, I won't waste your time here, but more than likely that will fix the issue. So as you can see, it's up and running. Some other things or caveats, if you go back, I'm going to go ahead and see if I can do that here. Yeah. If you hit the Windows key here, or if you've got an Xbox controller, hit the X button and it'll drop you out of your app. Now, if you notice, you can only view in this. I didn't have any controllers or gamepads, so I can't teleport around or move around with the gamepad. You literally have to walk around. In the future, once I get some game controllers, I will add that capability. And I don't know if they'll be the same as the Oculus. I think there's supposed to be a kind of a unified controller. I have not attempted to use that with the mixed reality system yet, so I don't know if it would work or not. I just want to get this up and be able to walk around in it, and it does seem to work. You can add audio. Basically everything, if you work with Unity, works in this. Okay, so I'm going to drop out of it. You just hit your Windows key on your keyboard and drops you out of it back into your Cliff House. So refresh back up to Unity. Essentially, some tips is you want to ensure that you have at least mobile performance. As mentioned, Ruslan baked everything into this. So the only thing I would do is ensure that your textures aren't too large so that you don't run out. But again, if you just increase the memory in your machine, unlike a mobile phone, you have the ability of holding more textures. And then if you go with a GPU, just get one with a lot of memory. This 1050 had 4 gigabytes. So textures would not be the issue here. But again, if you want to optimize your performance on mixed reality for multiple headsets, or multiple PCs, start out in a mobile realm. The other thing, if you're not familiar with Unity, is go to your edit and go down to project settings and go to quality. And what this does, if you look over on the right-hand side, I actually created one for mixed reality but you want to ensure that you only have enough rendering functionality that's needed. For instance, since everything was baked, I didn't need a lot of pixel light counts. And if you're using the ultra feature, you have 4 of them. Well, we didn't need 4 because we only have actually just 1 light. So there wasn't any reason for that. Also, make sure that you have some aliasing. I think the aliasing that I chose is a little bit weak. I would probably go to 4 times, but again, this all depends on the machine you're working with. If you're using a NUC, 2 times is about all it can handle without getting any juddering or lag. And then the other things down here, just to make sure your settings. So what I would do is just look at like one of your, like this medium setting here. Just notice how, let's see, what did I use? Kind of like it was high, very high, gives you 2 times multisound. So I kind of based it on this, but I just reduced the number of pixel lights to 1 for my mixed reality. Again, if I was using multiple dynamic lights, I would change that a little bit. But again, keep that in mind when you're creating this, that you want to treat this like a mobile platform, because you don't know what the end results will be on the PC side. Like I said, I can have this running on a NUC with integrated graphics now, or I can scale it up to a 1070 or 1080. So the performance is there. And I don't know if, in fact, I know for a fact that I had to scale back on the Unity end because the scaling feature on the Microsoft end just didn't do enough there. And this is one of the things that they suggest anyways. The other thing I want to look at is, where's my materials? If you don't need any special, and there's a lot of them because let's look at, let's say this table map. Make sure when you create it that you use your mobile. In this case, I use unlit because I baked, or Rustlin baked everything in, but I started to bake everything into mine. So make sure you use it with unlit and mobile, because that is the most efficient and better performing. I do have a few, like these window panes here are unlit with transparent. I did use a standard one on a feature that I'm not going to show. It's a little surprise because of some transparency features, but use them wisely and judiciously. Otherwise, again, optimize everything for a mobile platform, and that way you'll have a build that will work on multiple low-end machines. So that's just my recommendation. Later, I'll also do the small bathroom that I've kind of ported over to a number of systems as well, and we'll go there. But the fact is, for $300, you can get yourself a mixed reality headset and walk around and use it with a low-end $500, $600 system. I think is tremendous. Again, FOV on the mixed reality headset is wanting. It can be improved, but that means we'll probably have a higher cost system. But the fact is that Microsoft is behind this, and they already have some of the leading OEMs like Acer, Lenovo, Asus, Dell, HP building headsets. There's going to be some competition there. I would not be surprised of the system that I have now will be about $200. So I really feel that if you want to get into this, or if you're in a commercial environment or setting, or an educational and want very low cost systems, this might be the route to go. And with this latest announcement of using augmented functionality with their Surfaces and other tablets with rear facing cameras, that could be used in mixed reality, the hologram, or on a tablet, I think they've got a pretty cool ecosystem that they're going to continue to build upon. All right, so that's it for today. I'm glad that you're with me today. And if you're going to look at this over the weekend, just send me out a link or an email, or leave a message in the YouTube video, and I'll get back with you with a response. But I was very pleased how quickly I was able to put something together. And as mentioned, don't have any controllers yet, so I haven't ventured that, but be able to walk around an environment, as you can see in the video, is pretty dramatic. And the resolution and quality of the textures is better than I've seen in other mobile platforms. So I'm really looking forward to this. And obviously, the fact is that I could basically take a Nook and this headset. I would not be surprised, now that ARM also works with it, that there'll be a Snapdragon version of a headset like this, that you only have one device with the mixed reality and the electronics built in, or a belt system like I created. I'm pretty sure you're probably going to see that sooner than later. So on that note, I'm going to leave you. Enjoy your weekend, and I'll see you next Friday on 3D in Review on the all three, geez, can't even talk. All three, geez, I better go before all things 3D. Bye.